Every American knows the story of the Revolution, the shot heard around the world. George Washington, the Declaration of Independence, Yorktown. But what if I told you that another war was being fought hundreds of miles away? A war stretching from Louisiana to Mobile to Pensacola to Havana and even here on the island of Puerto Rico. A war fought beneath a different flag. A war involving Puerto Rican soldiers, Spanish generals, Caribbean ports, and one of the greatest military campaigns almost no American learns about in school. According to the United States Department of War, while Puerto Rico was part of Spain, Puerto Ricans fought alongside the American colonists during the Revolutionary War under General Bernardo de Galves. So today we're telling the forgotten story of how Puerto Rico became part of the fight for American independence. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Chronicles and Cocktails. I'm Josue, the spirited historian. Chronicles and Cocktails, the channel where history isn't just something you read, it's something you experience. One story and one cocktail at a time. Today, we're celebrating Independence Day week with a story that connects Puerto Rico directly to one of the defining moments in American history. Our island has always been connected to larger events unfolding across the Atlantic. Sometimes those connections were economic, sometimes cultural, sometimes political, and sometimes they changed the course of history itself. Today's episode is one of those stories because while George Washington was fighting in the north, another campaign was unfolding in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, a campaign which Puerto Rico played a real and often overlooked role. But before we get started, if you enjoyed discovering the history they didn't teach you in school, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and join in our growing community here at Chronicles and Cocktails. It really helps the channel, and it helps us continue telling Puerto Rico's story to audiences around the world. And if you haven't checked out our last episode about the connection between Santo Domingo and Puerto Rico, go check it out. I'll leave the link down in the description. When Americans picture the Revolutionary War, they usually imagine 13 colonies standing alone against Great Britain. It's an inspiring story, but it's only part of the story. The American Revolution eventually became something much larger. It became a global war. Britain wasn't just fighting rebellious colonists. It was fighting France. It was fighting Spain. And later, it would also face the Dutch Republic. Battles weren't confined to Massachusetts or Virginia. They were fought in Europe, India, Africa, the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. To understand Puerto Rico's role, we first have to understand that America didn't win its independence alone. It had allies, powerful allies. Spain did not enter the war because it wanted to create the United States. Spain entered because Great Britain was its greatest rival. El Rey Carlos III, or King Charles III, saw an opportunity to weaken Britain and recover territories Spain had lost during the 7 Years' War. The decision would reshape the course of the revolution. So, when people think about Puerto Rico in the 18th century, they often imagine sugar plantations, small villages, and tropical scenery, but that's only part of the picture. Puerto Rico was one of Spain's most important military outposts in the Americas. San Juan guarded the entrance to the Caribbean. Any fleet sailing between Europe and Spain's American possessions had to consider Puerto Rico. That meant the island wasn't just beautiful, it was strategic, it was armed, and it was ready. Long before the revolution began, Puerto Rico had become one of the strongest fortresses in the New World. El Morro, San Cristobal, the harbor batteries, the local militias all existed for one reason: to keep the British and every other rival European power out of Spain's Caribbean gateway. By the time the American Revolution erupted in 1775, Puerto Rico was no isolated island. It was already part of a vast Atlantic defensive network linking Cádiz to the Canary Islands, San Juan, Habana, Veracruz, Cartagena, and New Orleans. The island's soldiers, engineers, sailors, and militia belonged to a military system that stretched across the Spanish world. And soon, that system would be drawn into Britain's war with its American colonies. Something happened before the American Revolution that changed Puerto Rico forever. It wasn't a battle. It was a revolution. It was an inspection in 1762 during the 7 Years' War. The British captured Havana, and that shocked the Spanish crown. If Britain could seize Havana, what would stop them from taking Puerto Rico next? Spain needed answers, so King Charles III sent one of the most trusted military officers to inspect the island. His name? Alejandro O'Reilly. And interestingly enough, he wasn't even Spanish by birth, he was Irish. When O'Reilly arrived in Puerto Rico in 1765, he found impressive fortifications, but an island that wasn't fully prepared for modern war. The militias lacked organization, training was inconsistent, weapons were unevenly distributed, and communication needed improvement. So O'Reilly went to work. His recommendations transformed Puerto Rico. He reorganized the island's militia, improved artillery, strengthened the chain of command, expanded training, modernized recruitment, and reinforced San Juan's already formidable defenses. By the time the American Revolution began a decade later, Puerto Rico had become one of the strongest military positions in the Caribbean. That wasn't an accident. It was preparation. Preparation that would soon be put to the test. If George Washington became the face of the American Revolution, Bernardo de Galves became one of its forgotten heroes. Yet outside of historians, very few Americans know his name. And that's unfortunate, because without Bernardo de Galves, the story of American independence might have unfolded very differently. Before Spain officially entered the war, Galvez was already quietly helping the American cause. Gunpowder, medicine, blankets, weapons, supplies, some of those materials made their way to George Washington's Continental Army and to American forces operating in the western frontier through Spanish-controlled routes. Spain hadn't declared war yet, but it had already begun weakening Britain. When Spain formally declared war on Great Britain in June of 1779, Galvez wasted no time. He understood something Washington also knew. You don't always defeat your enemy by attacking his strongest position. Sometimes you force him to fight somewhere else. Instead of marching toward the 13 colonies, Galvez turned south toward British West Florida, toward the Mississippi, toward the Gulf of Mexico. His objective wasn't simply to win battles, it was to force Britain to divide its armies, its ships, its supplies, and its attention. The strategy would prove brilliant. But before Spain officially entered the war, there's a little-known incident on Puerto Rico's western coast that suggests the revolution had already reached our island. One of my favorite stories from this period happened not in Boston or Philadelphia, but right here in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico in 1777. That was 2 years before Spain officially entered the war. Listen to this. 2 American vessels sought refuge in the harbor after being pursued by a British warship. According to long-standing historical accounts from Mayagüez, British officers demanded that the ships be surrendered. The local Spanish authorities refused. The American vessels remained under Spanish protection. Whether viewed as a diplomatic confrontation or a symbolic act of defiance, the incident reminds us that the revolution was already casting its shadows across the Caribbean before Spain formally declared war on Britain. Now, was this a decisive battle? No. Did it change the course of the revolution? Probably not. But history isn't made only by famous battles. Sometimes it's revealed through small moments that shows us how people respond to great events. And the people of Western Puerto Rico understood that the conflict unfolded in North America was already reaching their shores. 2 years later, Spain entered the war, and Puerto Rico would become much more than a spectator. By the summer of 1779, Spain had made its decision. King Charles III declared war on Great Britain. The conflict that had begun 4 years earlier between Britain and its 13 rebellious colonies had become something much larger. Now it was a world war, and Puerto Rico was part of it. Not as a passive observer, but as an integral part of the Spanish monarchy's military effort. Puerto Rican soldiers, along with troops from Cuba, Mexico, Louisiana, Spain, Canary Islanders, free black militia, native allies, and local volunteers, joined one of the most diverse armies assembled in 18th century America. They did not all speak with the same accent. They did not all come from the same continent, but they fought under one command: Bernardo de Galves. This is something many history books overlook. The Revolutionary War wasn't fought by two armies. It became an internal coalition. The Continental Army wasn't alone. The French would help. The Spanish would help. And among those Spanish forces were the soldiers of Spanish Puerto Rico. While George Washington fought British armies in the north, Bernardo de Galves opened an entirely different front. His strategy was simple: attack British positions along the Gulf Coast, force Britain to defend territory it could no longer afford to lose. Every British regiment sent south was one less regiment available to fight Washington. Divide and conquer. In September 1779, Galvez captured Baton Rouge. With that victory, the British lost control of much of the lower Mississippi. Without fighting another major battle, Natchez also fell into Spanish hands. Britain's position continued collapsing. The next objective was Mobile. The siege was difficult. Weather delayed operations. But in March of 1780, Mobile also surrendered. Another British stronghold was gone. And then came Pensacola. This was the prize. The capital of British West Florida, the strongest British position in the Gulf, and perhaps the most important Spanish victory of the entire Revolutionary War. And the soldiers from Puerto Rico were there. More than 7,000 soldiers assembled. Reinforcements arrived from throughout Spain's American territories, including Cuba, Mexico, and Puerto Rico. For weeks, Spanish artillery pounded British defenses. Then, on May 8, 1781, a shell exploded inside the British powder magazine. The explosion shattered British defenses. Within days, Pensacola surrendered. British West Florida was lost forever. It was one of the greatest victories of the American Revolution, and yet most Americans have never heard of it. Now, let's answer the obvious question. If Pensacola happened hundreds of miles away, why does it matter? Because wars are won by strategy, not geography. When Britain committed thousands of soldiers, ships, supplies, and money to defending the Gulf Coast, those were resources it couldn't use somewhere else. While Washington and the French prepared to trap Cornwallis at Yorktown, Britain was already bleeding strength across the Atlantic world. Spain had forced Britain to fight another war on another front at exactly the wrong time for Britain. Historians continue to debate exactly how much the Gulf campaign influenced Yorktown. What isn't debated is that Spain's victories removed Britain from the Gulf of Mexico, secured the Mississippi, and forced Britain to divide its military resources during the closing years of the Revolution. That alone made Bernardo de Galvez's campaign one of the defining military operations of the war. And Puerto Rico? Through its soldiers, its strategic location, its military preparation, and its place within Spain's Atlantic network, was part of that story. Not the only story, but an important one, and one that deserves to be remembered. And after all that history, I think we've earned a cocktail. And since Independence Day is just around the corner, today we're making something fun. A patriotic piña colada. Piña Colada was born in Puerto Rico, so it makes sense that on this 4th of July, honoring the men that fought from Puerto Rico in the American Revolution, we shared a Puerto Rican cocktail. So this version is a simple and festive twist on Puerto Rico's most famous drink. Perfect for 4th of July barbecue, whether you're celebrating Puerto Rico, Texas, Florida, California, Alabama, New Jersey, or anywhere else across the United States. It's still unmistakably Puerto Rican Piña Colada, just dressed for Independence Day. History isn't about taking credit away from anyone. George Washington deserves his place. The Continental Army deserves its place. So do the French. But history is richer when we tell the whole story. And the whole story includes Spain. It includes Bernardo de Galvez. It includes Cuba. It includes Mexico. It includes Louisiana. And yes, it includes Puerto Rico. For generations, this chapter has been largely absent from both American and Puerto Rican classroom. From both. Many Americans have never heard that Spain fought alongside the revolution. Many Puerto Ricans have never learned that men from this island were part of that effort. But the historical record tells us otherwise. This fact is reaffirmed in the website of the Department of War. That doesn't diminish anyone else's contribution. It completes the picture. The United States wasn't born in isolation. Its independence emerged from a conflict that stretched across oceans, from the streets of Boston to the forts of Pensacola, from the Mississippi River to the walls of San Juan. History connected places that many people never think about together. And somewhere among those soldiers, those sailors, those convoys, those forts, were Puerto Ricans not seeking fame, not expecting monuments, simply doing what history required of them. 2.5 centuries later, their story still deserves to be told. If you enjoyed episodes like this, please consider becoming a member of Chronicles and Cocktails. Your support helps fund research, trips, archival work, museum visits, and the production of episodes like this one. And if you found today's story interesting, a super thanks is another great way to support the channel. Thank you. It truly makes a difference. If this episode surprised you, share it with someone who loves American history, because chances are they've never heard this story before. Leave me a comment below. Did you know Puerto Rico played a role in the American Revolution? And what's another overlooked chapter of American or Puerto Rican history you'd like us to explore? If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Josue, the Spirited Historian, and this has been Chronicles and Cocktails. I'll see you next Sunday with a very cool episode. But for now, be good, be nice, have fun, get smart, read a lot, travel whenever you can, have a cocktail or two, and of course, go to church. Salud.